Well, welcome and thank you for watching. This is the London System versus Azeez 1100 Game 2. So let's begin. D4, G5. Now I remember when I first saw this play, I really had to look at it because I couldn't believe that the bot would move a pawn to an unprotected square in line with my dark square bishop. And I remember I paused for a moment looking, is this some kind of trap? Is there something I'm not seeing here? And just came to the conclusion, you just take. And the game goes on. Bishop G7, kind of doing the fianchetto, noting that we have an attack upon our pawn at D4. So let's protect that with knight to F3, F5, E3, D5, bishop to D3, A6, the B knight to D2, A5, C3, and C6. So we have reached that point in the game where we're now going to begin to transition from the opening to the middle game. And one of the things I would have you take note is look at all these pawn moves. And what you're going to see is the lack of development on these minor pieces. Now, one of the values of having an opening structure is you know where you want your pieces to go. You get them out there as your opponent allows, and certainly the sooner the better. And we can see the advantage, as we've seen in other games, of getting our structure established and then quickly transitioning into the middle game with the full force of our structure, whereas at times our opponent still has not even set up the structure. So how are we going to move forward with this current setup on the chessboard? Well, one of the things that hopefully you noted is when this pawn on the F file moved from the F7 up to F5 and it opened up this light square diagonal. We know that one of the attacking lines of our queen is this light square diagonal coming up to H5. And so now I looked at this and said, okay, how can I get the queen to that space at H5 as quickly as possible? Simple solution was just to go ahead and move this knight at F3 to the square that we like for the knight to be in at E5. And if there is a take-take scenario here, that's fine, because it opens up this diagonal for my queen to come and target the king. So we made that move. The queen comes up to D6, and so now we will move our queen to H5 check. And if you note, there's no way in which the black is able to block this check. So the king has to move to king D8. So once again, we have a little flurry of activity. It's time to just kind of pause for a moment and see our situation on the chessboard and where we advance going forward. And I'm hoping that you saw what took me maybe about 5 minutes to see, and when I saw it, I was delighted. If you don't see it right now, pause the video, and then we'll note where it is. Okay, so if you notice, and hopefully you did, take the knight at E5 and move it to F7, and you're going to end up with a triple fork. The rook, the king in check, and the queen as well. So it's probably like a triple play in baseball. You don't normally see that very often, so when it happens, it is very unique. And so we can see that black is going to lose their queen in the very next move. King moves to C7, and now we take with the knight. So the king captures the knight, and one thing I want you to note is that the king has moved from the 8th rank to the 6th rank moving forward, and the pieces that potentially could help defend the king are all on the 7th or 8th rank. And again, the lack of structural development at the opening is certainly causing our opponent to be in a very undesirable position at this point in the game. So we move our bishop to f4, placing the king in check. The king moves to d7. And now we can see again, we have another bishop move with our light squared bishop this time to capture this pawn at f5 and again put the king in check. So we do that. The king moves to king d8. So I elected in this position to go ahead and exchange bishops. Black responds with knight to f6, targeting my queen, but I can move to safety with my queen and then also protect my bishop at the same time by moving the queen to f5. That is what I did. Black responds with b5. And now I'm looking for some way in which to bring about either check or checkmate. And one of the opportunities that I see is to take the bishop and move it to the b7 square and then possibly get the queen here to the c8 square. So I kind of started along that path, moved the bishop first, and black blocks me with the knight coming to d7. And of course, I can't just rush in there with the queen right now. It is being protected by both the king and this knight here. So, you know, might as well just go ahead and take the rook at this point. Black responds with a 4. So I made note of this pawn at c6 as potentially being a target. So I elected to move my queen forward to e6 so that I would be able to have some eyes on this along with my bishop. So I did that, and Azeez responds by bringing his dark square bishop back to f8. So now the bishop can take that pawn at c6, and should Azeez retaliate there, I can just simply move over with my queen and take. But black responded by moving the dark square bishop back to g7. So I need to find a way to break through this two-knight defense here for the king, and saw the opportunity for the dark square bishop to come down and take this knight at b8. So that's what I chose to do. Black responds by taking with the knight, and of course I cannot come in here for checkmate because the knight protects that. But at the same time, I need to make note that the knight is also targeting my bishop at c6. So I'd like to find a way to protect the bishop, but also put some pressure on the king. And as you can see, if I were to bring my queen here to d5, I could accomplish both of those. So I did. Black responds by moving the king to c8. And I'm going to move back to e6 to put the king in check. And now we're kind of back where we started, so to speak. So the bishop will capture this pawn at b5. Black responds with h6. And now I need to bring in some reinforcements to finish this off. So I elect to begin moving my knight at d2 to e4. Black responds by again moving the dark square bishop back to f8. I'll continue to move my knight to c5, a3, and then coming into direct contact and conflict with the knight at b8, I'm going to move my knight to a6. And black responds by moving the knight to c6. We will take that with the bishop. And now we are really just one move away from checkmate. Now, it is imperative at this point that we know that our next move would either put the king in check or bring about the end of the game, because down here at b2, if we do make a mistake by accident, we're going to lose a rook and black is going to gain a queen. We're going to have to move our king up, and then this queen is going to come over and take this rook, and we're going to be in dire straits at that point. So it's always good just to rehearse within your mind before you make the final move, especially when this kind of move is on the line down here. Just make sure you're on good footing. As the old saying goes, you know, fools rush in. So don't rush in, check, recheck, and then maybe you want to check one more time. And sure enough, if we put the queen there at d7, the game is over. So I hope this video has added to your understanding of the London system. We've seen once again the value of getting our structure of the London set up, transitioning from the opening to the middle game, understanding the lines of attack and potential strategic squares that our pieces could move to, and then you go through the game and wait to see how your opponent responds, but you already have a base knowledge of where you might want to go with some of these pieces. So once again, as always, thank you for watching. We're going to move on in the intermediate bots to Laura 1100. Hope to see you in the next game.